Welcome to this episode of Becoming Elite Financial Advisor. I'm Sten Morgan. Today, we're going to be talking to George Sandman about business owner conversations. How do you talk to business owners to stand out from other advisors? What are the key topics you can discuss with them, put on a whiteboard, teach them a framework that's going to show them that you are different than all other advisors? Business owners is a really great market to get into, but I find a lot of advisors are intimidated by it. So let's unpack this with George so that you can feel more confident working in this market starting tomorrow. George, thanks for being here, buddy.
Thank you very much, Jen. I'm excited to be here.
We've been talking, maybe it's been 4 or 5 months now. I've been learning about your trainings, your background in business, and it just all kind of came together in my mind that I run into a lot of advisors that want to be in the business owner space.
Yes.
But it's somewhat of an intimidating market to serve, especially if maybe you don't run a business as big as your prospects or they have more money than you, that a lot of advisors say they want to, but they don't know how to get into it. So today I want to unpack your experience in the business owner space, talk about the ways you drive value for business owners.
Sure.
But then also if you can kind of, towards the end, we'll coach advisors up on like practically how do you get in rooms with business owners and what are the things they want to hear. But if you'd start by giving us your background, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Stan. I'm really psyched to have this conversation. So thanks again. I'm an attorney by training. Don't generally admit that in public. But I got out of the law profession a very long time ago, and I've spent about 30 years doing a series of startups, growth companies. I've had some great successes. I've also flown into the side of the mountain, which, you do this long enough, everyone will. And for the last almost 15 years, I've been in this space, being an advisor to advisors and helping, specifically management consultants and CPAs, but I think most interestingly, wealth advisors and insurance advisors, some M&A pros, but these advisors, people who sit with the business owner, with business owners and with CEOs, and over the course of that 15 years, I've developed a methodology and a process. It's called the 3 dimensions of business growth. And I won't get into the details here, but really it is these are proven strategies for helping business owners increase the transferable value, right? The assets under management value of their business, and importantly, increase the potential, the likelihood that their business could do one of 2 things. One, be an ATM that's just cranking out cash, and we'll talk about that, or sell to a third party or to their senior leadership team in a way that's successful. And importantly, very importantly, helps the current owner meet their personal wealth goals.
Nice. Yeah, it came up when we had one of our early conversations, and I went to a conference a month or 2 ago, and it was just driven home in my mind that a lot of people listening right now may not be planning to sell their company. And they work with clients that have this emotional connection to their business. They're like, oh, I'll never sell. But I've realized you almost need to look at it the same way, regardless of if you want to sell or not. Because if you make the right decisions to make yourself really appealing on the open market, those are the same decisions you need to make to build a company you want to keep forever.
That is exactly right. We call in our community, the Growth Drive community, we call those businesses the oil well. And a lot of your audience, the audience listening today, you're running a business, right? You have an advisory business and maybe you never want to leave. Well, congratulations. That's great. You still want that business to serve your family's wealth needs and to serve your stakeholders and to create a legacy. That is the same exact mindset that exists in business owners and CEOs out there, in your clients and prospects. So heck yes.
Yeah. So for everybody listening, all the advisors, where this impacted me immediately was the way I start talking to business owners in a way to where they're like, oh, you are a business owner. Like, we're business owners together. So I can relate to the stuff you're thinking about. My approach language has changed with business owners when I talk this way. That I'm like, hey, here's what I see in a lot of business owners. They do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, wow, you just kind of described my business, unfortunately. And I say, but in a perfect world, if we work with the right advisor, we could build a business that looks like this. And you almost paint a vision of like, wow, imagine it can run without you. Imagine that you have data that's up to date all the time. Like, you're not telling them exactly how to get there. You may participate in the financial side of that vision. But if you're the type of person to say, I've been around businesses that look like this, but I've also been around businesses that look like that. In a 1-hour meeting with a business owner, they go from being like, this is just another financial advisor trying to sell me something, to, you're speaking in a way that I've always wanted to interact with an advisor, but I've never experienced it before. And so for everybody listening, think about the language George is using. And my hope is you guys have somewhat of a framework or a script you can come up with that to a person that has a W-2 job wouldn't make sense. But if you want to get into the business owner space, to me, at times, it feels like a different language we're speaking.
100%. And, you and I in the green room were talking about AI. This is somewhere where AI can be very, very helpful. We always have to be careful to double check and triple check what AI is generating. But you're right. The fundamental question for advisors, for wealth advisors is how do I help my clients and prospects understand that I am absolutely relevant to the growth and value of their business? And I want to make with a very careful point. We are not, I would never advocate that a wealth advisor lift the hood and start turning the wrenches on the business engine. That's not, you're having way too much fun and making money doing what you do today. You do not need another profession. And there are people who can help you, collaborate with you to do that. But you do want to communicate that you understand the business. You understand the business and the relationship to your clients' wealth goals, and that you can start educating them, right? Educating is different than planning. Planning is different than execution. But you can start through conversation educating this asset class, right? This class of potential clients or current clients about where their business is today, and really importantly, why you're relevant from this conversation forward. And I'd love to, if it's appropriate, get into a few of the wealth planning products and services that are relevant today to a business owner.
Well, I'd love that. Yeah, well, you just said the education first. One of the terms we use is value first, meaning can you bring them something that if they never see you again, they're like, wow, you left me better off.
Yes.
And I think if we bring somebody in and we're trying to fit an insurance peg into a hole, or we lead with, hey, can you transfer your 401k to me? At times we're missing the bigger conversation that really matters most, which is what's the point of your biggest asset? What do you want your life to look like? And the AUM will come, they'll need some insurance, but if we can almost switch that to have this strategic conversation that is like, hey, you actually get it. Like I wake up every day with hopes of what I'm going to do for my business. And then before I get to the office, there's 4 fires and I spend another day running around frustrated. And I'm like, dude, that frustrates me too, but I have a team. And when you build the right team, we can take those things off your plate and you start painting this picture of like, if you have good advisors in place, your life can be much easier. It doesn't make business easy because business is a challenge, but I think it's that where I see most advisors fall short. They just don't know how to communicate that way to a business owner. And then the business owners are really good at sniffing out, lack of confidence or kind of a sales script. They can figure that out pretty quick.
Sure. And imagine sitting down with a business owner and having a conversation. And this is where technology, and there are a lot of different ways to go about this. So I'm not here shilling for what we do. I am though absolutely shilling for doing this. No matter what path you take, please have these conversations. It's vitally important to you and to our communities. Having a conversation that is a holistic conversation about the business. And there's nothing better than sort of shocking your client and shocking them by educating them, leaving them with a higher degree of knowledge than they had when you sat down with them. Well, in our world, we have a very straightforward, it's incredibly powerful behind the scenes, but the way you interact with it is very elegant, very straightforward. That's a series of a few questions, takes about 10 minutes. And in about 10 minutes, we can start harnessing the power of technology to say, okay, well, here's what your business would look like to whoever's going to follow you, whether they're going to follow you as your job or they're going to follow you as the owner. Here's what your business looks like to a professional outsider. Here's the good things you're doing. And here are the areas that you might want to go and think about. And by the way, here's what your business could be. Here's the value of the asset you've created. And here's how much of that value you could monetize. And that's what's the value of this business net of the risk that typically the business owner presents to future revenue.
Yeah, I love that. I'm still working through your content and your system because for me, working with business owners, it's one thing to be good at having a conversation in a conference room and putting cool stuff on a whiteboard for them to be like, oh, this is like, I believe you. I think it's another to have a framework or a system to actually deliver the value. And I feel like there's some advisors that get good at communicating and selling the business owner on what could happen. But then they're like, well, what do I bring? And the assessment I've used is such a cool conversation starter that you've built because it's not saying, hey, here's every answer to all your problems, but it's saying, here's the categories you're going to need to focus on. And here's the reason why you'd want to focus on it. And what's a relief for us, like you said early on, is the advisor doesn't have to be the solution to every one of those categories. But you could be, as their financial advisor or hopeful financial advisor, the first person that ever laid it out that way for them to have clarity on like, oh, now I have some direction to go.
Sure. And it's definitely a lot of food for thought, Sten. I agree. I totally agree.
What do you think, if you can kind of walk us through your framework at a high level, how advisors would fit into that without trying to, like you said, create other jobs for themselves?
Sure.
Where do we fit in that whole system?
So a wealth advisor, wealth advisors are critical. You know, the reason I spend so much time working with wealth advisors, you are critical. You are the people who help plan and deliver future wealth, right? And for most, and I'll make some generalizations, but for most business owners, their business is the repository of their wealth, and it is an illiquid asset, and typically, without getting into stats, an underperforming asset, right? Businesses are often not going to deliver at the same rate as a good index fund. Now, in terms of wealth, now
it
how
can
do
be
we
an
change
ATM
that?
though, right? Like it kicks off some income for the owner, and they feel good about it.
Yep.
But the asset itself is what you're talking about.
Well, and let's dig in. Let's use think about if you're listening to this to Stan and I talk. Think about your typical business owning client, and as someone who feels successful, right? And they are, by outside appearances and by many measures, successful. They drive a fast car. They have a comfortable home. Maybe they have a vacation home. They take whatever trips they want. They have very low personal debt. Things look pretty good, right? That sounds good. The challenge is that this asset that is generating those revenues, generating that income from them, is not immortal, meaning that it will not go on to greater glory after they retire or after they leave the business than it is with them in it. And therein lies a big part of the problem. In M&A circles, we call it owner dependence. It's the first thing that investment banker is going to ask, is going to try to drill into. Are you the business, or is it a business? Is it your job, or is it an asset? And if it's an asset, it has value. If it is simply your job, it has no transferable value. And that's the coin we need to help a business owner get. How do you treat your business the way a professional, think of a private equity operator. How do you run your business the way a private equity operator would, to the benefit of your own future wealth? I can get into that in detail, but that's the sum total.
What is it, 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 business owners that are disappointed with the valuation when they go to sell?
I think 9 out of 10 would be disappointed. So business owners are smart, right? And they know, let's take manufacturing. If you're running a manufacturing company, and you know that if that there's a, sort of a 2 to 6 times, profits or EBITDA multiple that you could get at the deal table. And if you're really lucky and you get up to a certain size and a certain quality of business, we're talking quality as we call it strategic capacity, that you might even get 7 or 8 times earnings at the deal table. The challenge is a lot of business owners assume, again, fast car, big house, having a good time, that they're going to be at the 6X. They're using personal experience, personal lifestyle to color their perception. The challenge is that then they get a value done, a real value, not a discounted cash flow, which is, we won't get into this, but a market comp value of the business, the private capital markets perspective on what this business is worth, net of risk. Very important, net of risk. And that's what the private capital markets, PEG groups, et cetera, will pay. That number is essentially always disappointing.
Yeah.
And it also creates an opportunity. So you're a wealth advisor. You're like, I know, listen, you've created a $30 million asset. Our prediction is that you could sell it if you're able to successfully sell it. That's a big if. 19 out of 20 companies can't complete due diligence. Then you will get 18 million. That 12 million is how private equity makes their money, right? So that 12 million, you have a decision to make, Madam Business Owner. You can put it into your pocket, or you can walk away from it. And there are a variety of reasons why they might want to walk away. But imagine educating the client that they've created 30 million, that they could monetize it for 18, that there's 12 million at risk. And you're like, hey man, and I am not the one to help you grow that. However, maybe we should talk to someone.
Yep.
Maybe you should get a professional advisors, and I use the word advisor very deliberately, a growth advisor's perspective for free, right? These are typically, those consultations are free, about what you might want to consider doing. It's a very low risk. Now, your business owner, your client, your prospect came into a conversation expecting to be sold, the Janus fund and an extra 1/10 of a point of return and some insurance product, right? That's what they came in armed, kind of fearing you were going to hit them with, but they're open to it. They took the meeting.
Yep.
And you're like, hey man, that is all, that's table stakes. I want to talk about this asset. I want to talk about the likelihood that it can contribute to your wealth, what it would need to contribute, how big it will need to be, how healthy it'll need to be. And again, I'm a wealth advisor. I don't work on that, but I'm going to create awareness. And creating awareness, me telling you where the best restaurant in town is, you're probably going to call me and say, hey man, we had the best meal, right?
Yep.
I didn't take you there and I didn't cook, but that psychology carries.
Yeah, what I'm enjoying going through your content, taking some of the courses, is one, I'm developing new language that, as opposed to being in a room and just hoping the conversation ends where I want it to, it's like I'm steering it. I'm like, here's the truth about the value of most businesses. Here's some stats for it. And then here are the categories. Here's the levers as a business owner that you can pull to drive value. And oh, by the way, here are the ones we can help you with. Oh, and by the way, I can manage your money and sell you some insurance. Like that order is way more successful than, hey, I'm Sten. I've been in the business for 15 years. Do you want some insurance? No, we'll talk about your business someday. For all the advisors listening, for me to be able to send them an assessment that George built that gives them this view they've never seen before, which is, that's helpful and it's a cool tool. And then for me to develop the expertise, not to be George, I don't want to help people scale and sell their businesses.
That's right.
But to be able to sit in a room with people and hold that conversation and not feel uncomfortable. I mean, that in and of itself is like a 10x shift for advisors that are kind of still saying the same thing they might have said 10 years ago to the same clients. That's my...
Sten, thank you very much. And I'm thrilled and honored that you were participating in the C3D certification course. Thank you.
We'll have links. I'll have links to all that. So as you guys listen to this assessment we're talking about, like we'll share it. We're not going to keep that a secret, but the takeaway is not to get overwhelmed with new knowledge, and get a doctorate in this and try to be George, but it's to know enough to be relevant. I wrote that word down. I said, are you relevant to the business asset? And I don't think most advisors are at all.
Yeah, I agree with you as a guy who's had a couple of financial advisors in his life. And Sten, you make a couple of really good points. One of which we've been dancing around is there are a lot of things that wealth advisors have access to, both services and products, that are incredibly relevant to a business owner. So those of you who have kids out there, put your hands up, right? So if you put your hand up, you have kids, if you want to get them to clean their room or mow the lawn or do some other chore around the house, there are two approaches. One is to tell them to do it. And you know how that's going to go, or at least that's how it was going to go at my house. The other is to say, hey, buddy, I know you're going out on Saturday. You're going to want some walking around money. If you want to earn some, come find me. Now the lawn is going to get mowed, and it wasn't my idea. It was theirs. The same psychology applies with business owners. So rather than sitting down and saying, hey, I have an idea. Why don't you pay me to do some advanced wealth planning? Why don't you pay me to do some succession planning? Why don't you pay me to create a sophisticated compensation plan? Why don't you pay me to buy insurance? None of those, which they may be willing to do, much better if they say, hey, in our conversation here, it seems to me that maybe I need to get into some succession planning. I'm now understanding that the risk to my future that's presented by my senior leadership team, if I get hit by a bus, all of those things, we can do that. You can generate as a wealth advisor. You can earn revenue at the beginning of the engagement. Sure, assets under management is the long ball, but how do we make ourselves relevant to de-risking the business in a way where the client's putting their hand up and saying, I don't think $3 million of life insurance is enough. It sounded like a lot when I bought it, but now that I'm really thinking this through and I'm looking at the business debt that's going to have to be paid off or, whatever, maybe we need to up those policies without even getting into your more sophisticated planning services, which are fantastic. But
yeah, and I've had quite a few advisors come to me, and usually this isn't the story you share with everybody at the conference, but at a table on the side, you share. I lost some of my biggest clients because when they had a liquidity event, they didn't think of me as the advisor that was capable of handling that. But I've also seen some advisors that were somewhat prepared and their book of business skyrocketed when they got a $40 million liquidity event for a client. Like, there's so much potential in the business owner space. But if your thought is, and this is what I call like the relationship crutch, man, I've been Jim's advisor for 10 years. Like, I got him. Like, he's locked in. But yeah, as long as Jim doesn't sit with a better advisor, that somebody doesn't get in front of him that gives him a totally different experience. So for me, I think there's part of this that gets you new business, but also will insulate your future potential A+ level clients, because almost every advisor I talk to, their biggest clients are business owners.
Yeah. Well, Sten, and if we can amplify on that point, there are two things that are happening. First of all, I have stood literally in the boardroom of a household name wirehouse, one of the first names you'll think of, and had this exact conversation. And the wirehouse passed, and we can talk about that, but they are very aware of this issue. Now imagine think of your business owner and client, and you are not having this conversation. If I want to disrupt your relationship, I'm going to say, hey, I know you and your own business. Congratulations. But how's that going? And, are you working with someone? Oh, I work with Sten. Oh, great. I know Sten. Sten and I played golf last week. He's a great guy. Tell me, has Sten ever talked to you about the value of your business? Has he ever talked to you about the likelihood, guys, I'm not putting this in sales speak. I'm putting this in, just very clear language. Has he ever talked to you about the likelihood that business would actually be able to sell? He hasn't? Oh, I'll tell you what, let me do you a favor. I'm happy if you share this with Sten, but, do you have a few minutes? We could just run through a quick analysis. I'm going to give you a very precise calculation of what your business is worth and honestly what the discount would be, and, just give you some food for thought. Does that make sense? Now that conversation gets into, I know, listen, Sten has your 401k. I'm not trying to get your 401k. It was Sten and I are, we're buddies. We're simpatico, but I do want to talk to you about this asset. And there you're hitting Sten below the waterline. And I assure you, and I'll go back to that boardroom conversation, eventually that 401k is marching out of your office. Everything, the money market, the whole shebang is going to go, because what happens at the deal table is investment bankers have friends, and their friends are wealth advisors. And they're saying, hey, listen, $20 million, $2 million, whatever that number is, that's a lot of money. And, maybe you just ought to get a second opinion on what to do with that money. And now, and now Sten is sitting down and saying, hey, we can get you into IPOs. We can get you into these sweetheart funds, et cetera. And it works.
So you're playing in a different league now to level up your advisor. Like, is kind of the impression that I've seen people run into. And I think the emotion behind that is like the frustrated advisor is mad because they know it's kind of true. Like, I was hoping and relying on the relationship to secure this versus bringing a new expertise to the table or value. I do think the advisors that hang out in our community and come to our events, like, I am passionate about them getting paid for their time and ideas, so they're not product driven. What's cool about this conversation is, like, you are teeing up future assets, but you also should charge for that engagement. So that conversation on the golf course, like, my hope is there's some free value there of like, hey, here's a quick assessment. Man, you should probably pay $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 for me to put you through this. I'm not taking your AUM, but like there's a cost and there's a value to this.
Yep.
And what's great about that conversation is the AUM does eventually come. If they want to buy insurance, they'll probably ask you if you want to help them with that. But you also don't need to give it away all for free, which I still see advisors doing. They're giving away kind of free ideas to still try to sell stuff. And I think you can get paid really well for the process you just explained.
Absolutely. And philosophically, when you're delivering value, you should get paid. Now, the first nip, the first snack, that should be free. You're educating them, and that's kind of that knowledge is your leave behind. But from that point forward, Stan, I could thoroughly agree. We're delivering value. We should get paid for that value and get paid on a value basis for the insights, advice, reports that you're delivering. Heck yes. Could I make go ahead?
Go ahead. After that point, if you could kind of walk us through some of these key categories that you want business owners to be aware of when it comes to driving value in their business, just at a high level,
Sure.
That'd be great.
Sure. The point I was going to make is if you as an advisor think about your advisory business, I want you to think about, and you can get out a blank piece of paper and start writing this down. What are wirehouses giving? Wirehouses are guaranteeing two times gross income, advisory income. So you have a $250 million AUM, you're generating, 2.5 a year. That's $5 million. That's what your wirehouse is guaranteeing they're going to give you. You go out on the open market and that you can get as much as 10x. So the valuations that wealth advisors are getting for their businesses are through the roof. Now imagine getting 10x. What impact does being at the table and getting $20 million of AUM have on your personal wealth? And you stitch a couple of these together and you're having a transformative effect for your stakeholders, for your family. So this is all critically important to advisors. Thanks for letting me make that point.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do have some buddies that recently sold. And through the selling process, they learned a lot. And you're like, oh, dang, like if I would have only known that, if I would have spent 2 more years with this new knowledge pushing towards a healthier number.
Yeah.
That is really what we're trying to offer our business owners. Hey, you're thinking of an exit. Let's at least do it strategically and not reactionarily at the end. But I've seen, for everybody listening, front row seat, some of my buddies selling their businesses. And it's like, ooh, like another 20 million, what that would have done. And if they could get their revenue over 5 million a year, what that does to multiples, like through them, I've learned so much that's impacted, do I ever think I'm selling legacy? Today, I don't. But if something happens in my life 5 years from now, it'd be pretty cool that I was thinking that way and somewhat prepared if something forced me to do that.
Well, and Sten, there are two things. One, the sooner you start, whether you're an advisor working on your business or creating knowledge, helping your clients view their business, the earlier they start, the more likely they are to be successful and the bigger the number. That is, the data is in. I've been doing this for a very long time. Actually, maybe I'll just leave the point there, but these are critically important conversations. Start as soon as possible. And everything we're discussing here applies to businesses regardless of industry. So it applies to advisory businesses, especially right now when, multiples again are frothy.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you can give us, before we wrap up, the categories. I know, not revealing too much of your system, there's a lot that kind of goes behind the scenes, like you said, but on the surface, what are some of those key drivers that you feel would be most helpful if an advisor learned to educate a business owner on the true impact or true value of that?
So I'm going to keep this at a very high level. I'm focused on two things. First of all, we talk about strategic capacity. Strategic capacity is really the ability of a business to predictably and sustainably grow free cash flow, right? So the more likely that a business can do that, the more valuable it is. You made another point, as you move up the revenue, you increase your financial demographic. You go from 5 million a year to 10, you're adding extra turns at the deal table. Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about strategic capacity, we want to make this intuitive. You sit down and start using jargon like that with your client and forget it. Their eyes glaze over. So what we want to talk about are things like what we call the 3 dimensions of business growth. And what are those 3 dimensions? They're creating predictable profits and cash flow. That's the launch pad for growth. So when a client says 62% of clients will say, I want to grow my business. Great. don't you think we should have a launch pad, that we should understand the money we have to invest in new machines, in people, in expanding our market presence, etc.? Great. The next dimension 2, is predictable, sustainable growth. That is a different set of levers we need to pull inside the business, and they build on dimension 1. The third dimension is predictable, transferable business value. That is M&A price, predictable M&A price. And whether your client is going to sell the business or not, predictable M&A price is incredibly powerful. Now, when you sit down with a client and say, well, hey, man, why don't we break the business down this way? I'm not going to help you grow it, but would it be helpful if you focused on cash first and then invested in growth? And then we can come back and we'll work with a professional, an investment banker, an accounting professional, to make sure that you've done all of the other things that can trip you up in due diligence. If we break it down into those 3 phases, might that make sense? Mm-hmm. Who in their right mind is going to say no?
That's right.
Right? No, I don't want to know how much cash I'm going to have to put into growth. I just want to spend money like a drunk sailor. No. So this is super intuitive. And because it's so intuitive, your clients can grasp it, recollect it, and go off and think about it, as they continue their golf round, right? And continue to think about it, and your phone will ring.
Yeah.
Your phone will ring.
If you add value, educate, I think the hope for a lot of advisors is that your reputation becomes, hey, if you own a business, like you just need to meet with Sten. Like, I'm not relying on people to say like, hey, he sells great insurance, or man, his portfolios are great. Because those conversations do not, I think, come up as naturally in life. But it is like, man, Sten taught me these 3 dimensions, and man, I wasn't focusing on number 2 because honestly, I'd never even heard of it before. That I think business owners have those conversations more so than AUM and insurance conversations.
I love to hear you say that, because what you've just described is the difference between a value conversation and a commodity conversation. And if you're in the commodity conversation, you ought to just, fake being sick, get out, come back, put your thinking cap on, and get into a value conversation. Yeah. And again, you don't have to run back into the kitchen and cook the steak and carry it out. You just have to tell them how to get a great meal, the things they might start thinking about. And we have a complete community, a diversified professional community, of which you remember, that has management consultants and investment bankers and CPAs and on fractional CFOs, and a lot of wealth advisors who are engaged in this very work and who are crushing it.
Yeah, this conversation is never going to go away. Small businesses are the backbone of America, and hopefully will be forever. Yeah. So for everybody listening, my hope is you're not hearing us say, you need a PhD in this stuff and you have to do all this. I'm going through maybe kind of a deeper level of George's content just because I want to have a better working understanding of this world. But I think what you can start doing tomorrow is coming up with a couple whiteboard frameworks, even if it's these 3 dimensions. And you say, hey, if I never see you again, and you're talking to a business owner in your room, I want you to know these 3 things. This is what drives the value of the greatest asset you have. And unfortunately, most business owners do this. They're reactionary, life gets busy, and then someday they want to have a liquidity event and they realize all the stuff they wish they would have done. For any clients that work with us, if you have the right advisor, we want to get ahead of that. And here's what that looks like. You could come up with a 10 to 15 minute whiteboard framework conversation that blows people's minds. And you have yet to take a course, be an expert in M&A. Like, that's not required to understand it enough to communicate how important it is.
Yes. Heck yes. I thoroughly agree. Thank you, Sten.
You bet, brother. All right, man. This was fun. We'll put some links in there for George's stuff. You can go as deep as you want and as technical as you want, but I'm in the early stages and I'm still getting a lot of value.
Yeah, that's what it's designed to do. I'm thrilled to hear that, Sten. Thank you very much. This was a fun conversation.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.